Welcome, everyone, to the AWS studio. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael.
I know we're all here to talk about intent-based orchestration for hybrid edge use cases. Lots to unpack here, but let's start with some intros. Samir?
Yeah, happy to go first. Samir Vuyyuru, I have the privilege of leading business development for Amazon Web Services in the telco vertical. And what that really means in real life is I get to listen to really smart people at my customers and my partners, and work with really smart people inside AWS to go build what my customers are asking for and what my partners need. So that's essentially the role.
Excellent. So my name is Nati. Shalom. I'm the CTO and founder for Cloudify, now part of Dell, as of, I would say, a month. So pretty young on that big organization. And I think through my career, I was mostly working on highly distributed system and making complex systems simple and automating them. Previously in Gigaspaces, now on the Cloudify. And happy to work with Amazon. I think that we'll talk more about it, but I think that was quite a journey to see, the change that is happening in terms of complexity between what we experienced in the old days of telcos to what we can do today with the introduction of public cloud, and what I would say the public cloud effect on telcos.
Cool. My name is Yeang. Go by Max as well. I'm with Intel. I run the 5G and Edge ecosystem development. And what that really means is we look after the both side network and the edge so they can connect the dot, right, to make sure that the networks will get modernized, right, from time to time. At the same time, we look at the way to monetize the 5G edge services. So that's the role about, right? So we have a privilege to work with all the ecosystem to make sure that, hey, we all work together, right, to move the industry forward.
Let's start with you, Max. Always good to define our terms. What is intent-based orchestration?
Intent-based orchestration. So if you look at let's wind back a little bit from the beginning of how in telco world. In telco world, it used to be proprietary system, right? And over the past 5-6 years, it managed to decouple the solution, right? It used to be managed by the single vendors, right? Everything is all fully controlled. And once you move into a decoupled base, right, virtual the network function running on the standard high volume servers, you get into who will be the third party coming to manage the orchestration side, right? The problem gets solved, right, when you have 1 or 2 vendors. But moving into a cloud native world, you really need more ecosystem partners come in with open API, running at the standard tools and so on, so that the intent-based orchestration will come in, kick in, to drive the management, right, as on demand, right? And telco simply will need to have more deterministic, right? And it's still at the transition phase, but it's really what needed, right, coming next phase after the NFV. It's really needed in the marketplace.
So I want to zoom out and really talk about how that applies specifically to an AWS environment. So maybe starting with you, Samir, what were you hearing from customers in terms of deploying network functions and ever-changing network conditions?
I'm going to be a little controversial here, right? And I'm actually going to say it's actually not about the network function. It's about the use case that network function is enabling. So when we talk to customers, what they want is, for this particular use case that I'm going to run for this particular period of time at this particular quality of service, at this particular cost, give me the right set of network functions that then allow me to perform that function most optimally. That is the overarching problem statement if I could abstract out all the complexity. So it's really the application itself that's asking the network for what it needs, right? And so if you look at AWS, we have 100,000 plus partners running on AWS today with various different software packages that the industries want to use. So the needs of high definition security cameras are very different from a water meter, for example, right? In terms of what they expect of the network. And so when that application can basically, through those APIs, express its needs, and the network automatically adjusts to the optimal configuration, cost, performance, power, more importantly. That's really what our customers, our mutual customers, are asking us for, I think.
Yeah, I would add to that when you look at, I would say, the previous generation of telco networks is mostly a snowflake. You would go to every carriers and every not snowflake like the company Snowflake, but you'd go to every carrier, the same project would look very different than another carrier, than another carrier, and another carrier. And I think part of the things that even enable us to talk about Intentbased is the layer of consistency that now cloud really provides. Now the way you write things in the cloud and the way you write things in the edge and the way you write things in your development environment and production environment is the same. The way you write it in carrier A to carrier B is almost the same. That layer of consistency was a foundation that really allows us to have the discussion on Intentbased, because we used to talk about Intentbased earlier on, but the reality was still Snowflake. And I think that was kind of a very important piece in the evolution that I think what I call, again, the public cloud effect on telcos was, let's make the infrastructure consistent first. The foundation doesn't have to be that different. And let's start about thinking about the value to the customers, and let's not worry about plumbing and reinventing the wheel all the time.
So serendipitously, Snowflake's a large partner and customer of ours as well. and they actually do this with us as well in the telco domain. So you weren't right. You weren't wrong when you said what you said.
Yeah.
So we talked about the consistency of the experience you want to have, coupled with also the flexibility for operators to define their specific needs and have an orchestrator cater to those specific needs. So as you were designing the solution, Nati, as you used AWS, what was that journey like? What did you build and how did you build it?
I think everyone is familiar with automation silos. There is automation for networking, there is automation for application, there is DevOps automations, there is edge automations. A lot of those quote-unquote automations are basically different domains doing the same thing but slightly different. The difference is mostly in the things that you would get out of the box and in some cases the actual product that you're going to interact with. As a customer, and again, talking about the point that Samir has, this is a headache. They don't really see that nuances and differences as something that important that they would need to have different teams on each of those domains and have different layers of automation built for them and then have system integrator gluing them together, taking months and years of effort just to get things to run because it defeats the purpose of automation. And so for them, it's really how do I rationalize all of that to have an end-to-end automation? Because at the end of the day, I want to have the value, right? I want to have the network up and running for a certain use case. I don't want to worry about how to deploy DU in certain region. I want to have a 5G network or private 5G network. That's the use case. I want to have an application like Porto in the application itself in all those regions that are relevant. I want to speak at that language. I don't want to speak about DU and CO. And that's what that end-to-end automation really brings. And that's exactly what Cloudify really try to do, is really rationalize a lot of those domain automations into common automation scheme.
So from the cloud perspective, Samir, back to you. I heard Nati mention edge. And edge can be a very ambiguous term. Talk to me about how we think about the edge here at AWS.
So one of our VPs, Bill Voss, defines this really well. He basically says the edge is where you want to act on the data. It is really a continuum. So at AWS, we have a wide continuum of edge. Running on microprocessors with IoT Core, because we act on the data on the microprocessor itself with IoT Core, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we have local zones, right? Or even regions, right? Because that's where the data lives. That is the edge by definition. And IoT Core through to devices such as Monitron, which do manufacturing monitoring, as the name suggests. We have a lot of robotics applications, RoboMaker, for example. We have for disconnected mode of operations. We have the Snow family, which operates in rugged environments like battlefields and disconnected environments like ships at sea and so on. And then moving on up, we have various different form factors of outposts, which is essentially the same rack-level infrastructure or server-level infrastructure we use in our data centers, but that can then move into an on-prem environment and provide the cloud, not just compute, but the whole power of the cloud within an on-premise environment. And some people may choose to run their edge applications on the local zones, which are metro area deployments and data centers for us. So, just to expand on that, for us, the edge solves three problems, right? One is the law of economics. You do not really want to transport these terabytes and petabytes of data to a central location every time you want to act on it, right? The second is the law of the land, where we actually have a lot of regulations coming in on data residency, where certain data can live, where certain data can be visualized, and so on. And the third one is the law of physics, which is there are real-time applications now in safety and in automotive vehicles and so on, where you need that 5 millisecond, 10 millisecond, or even better latency. So our edge follows one of those three laws. That's the way we look at it.
And so you talked about this, all these sets of services that are highly geo-distributed, that often have very low latency requirements. Seems to me that DevOps and automation, all the topics, Nati, that you were referring to, are an absolute must. Maybe starting with you, Max, how important is DevOps methodology to these types of use cases? And then Nati, what types of services are you building, or were you building at Cloudify to help deliver on what customers were asking for?
Yep, it's extremely important, right? If you look at from virtualizations moving to a cloud native, DevOps is part of it, right? It's part of it to enable that transition and to maintain the consistency of the platform's features, right? Say today, within the world of the largest install base or the server based on Intel, we do have a set of the platform features, right, that customers they consume over the years. They don't have the luxury to just move it overnight. Well, it wouldn't happen. So it needs times. And it needs times to learn the skill set. It needs times to plan the migration. So DevOps will come into the place to help the team to plan ahead that, hey, when do I migrate? When do I push this forward, right? And to maintain the consistency as well in terms of the features they consume. And that's where Cloudify come in to help us, right, to make sure that the transition will happen, right? And glue us together between AWS and Intel, right? The platform consistency will just go across, right, from gen to gen migration. And it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a journey from virtualization to cloud native. DevOps plays such a critical role, right? It's a tool to gel it all together.
Yeah, so I'll try to take the developer perspective into that. So developers think about Edge as another compute node, potentially as if it was just a simple extension of the cloud, I would say in a very abstract way. They want to think about it. We all know that the physics are different. And our role is really to abstract a lot of those differences because Edge is remote. In some cases, it's not even connected to the same network. There is obviously much more regulation and security things that needs to be done, but a lot of that needs to be plumbing from a developer perspective that is abstracted. So first challenge for us is really to look at those differences and try to see how do we hide them from a developer. I'll give you one challenge to I think make it something more down to earth. In a regular data center, I would probably deploy an application on a central EKS cluster, and that will be my domain, my cluster. Maybe another site for disaster recovery or for availability. In an edge, most likely, and there's a production use case that we're running right now, it's 30,000 sites, 30,000 Kubernetes clusters, all running the same application. So from a developer perspective, it's one application, but it's located in 30,000 sites. Now, how do you ensure that such an application actually go to those 30,000 sites? What happened if it got to 29,000 sites, but the rest of the 9,000 wasn't successful? How do you know which one of them failed, and how do you resume from that failures? How do you roll back if that case happens? How do you deal with multi-tenancy in that type of environment where different customers have access to those type of environments? There's a lot of those challenges that if you don't abstract them, it's becoming very, very complex environments. And there is no way developer can even write continuous update into this. The last thing that I will mention, not to take too much time, is the realization that system always drifts, especially at scale. When you're, again, in a central data center, that drift can be manageable. When you have 30,000 sites running in different versions, you don't really upgrade them at the same time. You don't get them even from the same vendor or the same software. So how do you deal with such problem without exposing that complexity to the developers? Because again, if you expose it to the developers, it's become a nightmare. And that's really what we're trying to do. Really trying to take a lot of those challenges and saying, okay, developers doesn't have to know about that. How do we hide it? How do we abstract it? And we bring a lot of that complexity or knowledge or smartness or whatever into the orchestrator itself rather than the developer itself. That's really in a nutshell.
I think that was really well put, and I think we can all agree that managing 30,000 Kubernetes clusters manually, no fun.
No way.
No fun.
Yeah.
But let's dive a little deeper into the developer experience. I think that's really important. As a developer by trade, I'm sure there are many people asking, well, wait a minute, is it Edge and Cloud? Edge or Cloud? How do I choose? Open question.
So I would say that this is exactly the type of question that you don't want to ask as a developer, right? You want to say, I want to deploy this, and it needs to run in the East Coast. Where in the East Coast? I don't really care. Oh, it needs to run in a low latency environment. What is the actual endpoint that fits that SLA? That should be taken care of for me. I don't have to programmatically say, run on this instance of EKS in this location and whatever. So to answer that, I would say you don't need to worry about that question in the first place. The fact that we're exposing it still, because we're not there yet at the point of what you just mentioned, is a bug. Shouldn't be in that way, and we're not that far from abstracting it in that way. It's just an evolution. And I think we should get to the point where that question will go away. And we become policy, basically.
I'll just say one thing. Every edge node is the cloud for us. So there is no difference.
Well said.
And it's a consistency, right? Yeah, you just need that consistency. Yeah.
I can already tell from our discussion, this clearly isn't the first time the three of you had a chance to interact. So I've got to ask about the partnership, starting with you, Samir. As the three of you really just collaborate in the partnership between AWS and Intel, respectively, how's that partnership evolved?
I think it's evolved really well over more than a decade. In case people didn't know, Intel was the first instance of compute that we ever had in the cloud. So that was 2007, if I'm not mistaken, right? And since then, we've got hundreds of different types of Intel instances out there. And today, I mean, I'd say the majority of our workloads still run on Intel. So what they're innovating on, we have some input into it, but hey, their process technology, their chipset design capability, that's what we rely on to run the majority of our workloads today. So thank you.
Thank you as well. Yep.
And for you, Max, what does the partnership mean to you?
Well, it means a lot because, again, I'll stress on consistency a lot of time, right? Because the partner is really, the end user is asking for, hey, I want to make sure my investments are protected, right? And I move from one transition to the next transition, right? They want to pick the right environment to land on. And the fact is today, a lot of the networks itself is, well, successfully get virtualized, which is good. The next to go is like, hey, which environment am I going to land on? AWS provide a good environment as a cloud consistency, right, to abstract the layer. Right now, you have a right environment to go and pick from, right? And what's better is, go back to Sumir's I just mentioned, right? The first instance created since then, we have many more instances here add on, right? From AWS, right, based on Intel. And that itself created a different form factor as well. You have Outpost, right? You have the local zone, right? As well as the cloud. So there's a bunch of the option to pick from. And go back to Nati's point, right? Is about, forget about edge and cloud, right? You design, right, based on the environment that will decide for you, right, the SLA that you need. So that will need some time to get there, but we believe, right, today, what we built today is a good foundation. And the ecosystem partner right now will have a good foundation and come and look at, okay, that's how I'm gonna land for my application in order to get that consistency. So we're excited to bring more ecosystem partners here on board, right? It's simply one of the path that we can work together and make it happen. Yeah.
You mentioned the foundation, so much more to build here together. Maybe starting with you, Nati. Thinking big here, what's the next level of the collaboration between Cloudify, AWS, and Intel? Not just for intent-based orchestration, but the broader collaboration.
I would just maybe before that say one thing is that in terms of collaboration, we're working with Intel separately, we're working with AWS separately. on Kubernetes here, on Amazon DevOps here, and the evolution towards collaboration was, first of all, like a personal connection that saw the two and said, well, we actually have that use case, let's collaborate. But the thing is that the click was easy because we were running on the same platform. We already have knowledge about the platform. Developer knew about the platform, and we were able to collaborate last year with 3 vendors. This year with 6 vendors, including Mavenir, and including Polo, and including obviously Intel and Amazon and ourselves. And all of that in part-time work, remotely, in different time zones. That couldn't be done before. So I think we're already far in the future in terms of what I think, the way I would say traditional network runs and what we're showing today. So we're really, really, I think, already in that phase of where we're showing, I think, where the market could go and should go, so we don't have to think that far. The second thing is, as I think we're starting to discuss, is moving towards more policy-driven, basically moving a lot of the smartness from the human, from the people, into the machine, and we all know about ChatGPT and the AI and whatever. And the whole idea of putting that knowledge inside, even though it's scary, but also promising, is really where we need to go. There's still a lot of things that we're manually programming. We're manually educating the system where it could be self-educated and it could be self-managed decision allocation, failover, all those policies that exist right now. I think that will be the next level. But that foundation of consistency and the ability to do the intent-based is a mandatory foundation to even think about those things.
What about you, Samir? Next level.
Our overarching goal is to make AWS the best place to run network workloads, period, right? Because once we do that, you can bring the rest of that ecosystem of 100,000 plus partners into play very, very easily using this intent-based orchestration. So we're really focused on that. And again, going back to what Yeang Max said, basically, is that consistency of experience across the edge, whether it's an x86 IoT device or whether it's a Sapphire Rapids-based CPU-based device, right? That consistency underlies our edge today. And we just build on top of that, the cloud stack, and allow people who are innovators such as Cloudify to basically provide that orchestration layer, right? So I think we're there. I think what I would want to see now is hundreds, maybe thousands of developers starting to use us. I think that's really where we are today.
Great way to close us out. I mean, such a great example and fantastic collaboration to really empower the developer community to build networks for the future. That's exactly what we're doing here. Thank you all for joining the AWS studio, and I really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.